Okay, so Lebanon. Thousands of exploding pagers and radios. Sounds like something straight out of spy movie, right? But this is the real deal.
Absolutely. And the implications are huge.
Huge is an understatement. This thing has layers.
This event really exposes some vulnerabilities. I mean, we're talking about modern warfare, communication systems.
And all this in a region that's already a powder keg.
Exactly. The Middle East is,
Well, it's complicated as it is.
to say the least. But, okay, thousands of Hezbollah's devices blowing up. I mean, the scale of this attack is mind-blowing.
It wasn't random, that's for sure. This was a planned, coordinated assault. 2 waves. Two. First wave was September 17th. Targeted pagers specifically.
And
Then, less than 24 hours later, boom. Second wave. This time they went after handheld radios.
they even hit a funeral for the initial victims. Talk about brutal. It was a statement. But before we get into who was behind it and why, let's back up. We need to understand what we're dealing with here.
Right, the what before the who and why. So what were these devices?
The pagers were mainly gold Apollo AR-924 models, supposedly from a Hungarian company, BAC Consulting. The radios were ICOM ICV-82s.
Although ICOM denied that pretty quickly, claimed those radios were knockoffs. Older model.
You're right, probably out of production for years if they were ever even real ICOM products to begin with. And then there's BAC Consulting,
The pager company, what about them?
immediately placed under the protection of the Hungarian Secret Service. Doesn't really inspire confidence, does it?
Fishy, to say the least. So we've got potentially disguised devices, a company under government protection. Someone went to a lot of trouble to cover their tracks. It's like a puzzle with all these weird pieces. Disguised devices, Secret Service protection. Who would go through all this trouble?
Well, all signs seem to point in one direction: Israel.
Israel. You're kidding, really?
It might sound like a stretch, but multiple sources, some pretty high up too, have linked them to these attacks.
But why? Why go to such lengths? I mean, if you're going after someone, why not just,
More direct approach.
yeah, like a missile strike or something? This feels so roundabout personal almost.
And that's the key to all of this. This wasn't just about taking out Hezbollah's communication.
What do you mean?
This was about sending a message.
Yeah.
This was psychological warfare at its finest.
Okay, I'm listening.
Imagine the paranoia. You're Hezbollah, you've just seen your communication network literally blow up in your face. Literally.
It could be good for morale.
Morale. Forget morale. They're questioning everything now. Every phone call, every radio transmission could be a trap.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about it like that. This has to be messing with them big time.
Big time is an understatement. This is their biggest security breach since the conflict with Israel flared up again last year. Operations, communication, it's all disrupted.
And what about the human cost? We're talking dozens dead, thousands injured. That's not just Hezbollah.
Right, exactly. Civilians got caught in the crossfire, as always. Hospitals overwhelmed, schools closed, even air travel was disrupted.
This whole thing is a mess. Speaking of messes, where does this whole thing stand legally? I mean, can you even do this? Rig devices to explode like that?
That's where things get tricky. There's this thing called the Protocol on Mines, Booby Traps, and Other Devices. Dates back to '96. It basically says you can't use booby traps if they can't distinguish between a soldier and, say, a civilian walking down the street. They call those indiscriminate.
So the argument is whether these pagers and radios were inherently indiscriminate.
Bingo. And then there's the principle of proportionality. Did the military advantage of this attack outweigh the risk to civilians? A lot of people are saying absolutely not.
Okay, so legally it's complicated, but what about the international community? How are they reacting to all this?
Let's just say, not well. A lot of condemnation, even from some of Israel's allies.
I bet. Some are even calling it a terrorist attack.
They are. And it's not like this happened in a vacuum. You've got the whole Israel-Hamas conflict going on in the background.
Which has been a powder keg from the start.
Exactly. So you drop this attack into that mix, and suddenly everyone's on edge.
Hezbollah is vowing to retaliate.
Right. And then you've got Israel's defense minister, Gallant, basically saying, bring it on. He's already declared a whole new phase of the war focused on their northern border with Lebanon. It's a mess.
It's insane that something as low-tech as a pager could cause this much chaos. You usually hear about fancy missiles and cyber attacks, not exploding pagers.
It just goes to show that you don't always need cutting-edge tech to cause serious damage. This was low-tech, sure, but it was smart. It exploited a vulnerability, and the effects are being felt way beyond just communication outages.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the future of warfare and the rules of engagement. Like, where do you even draw the line?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
And what about the use of technology? The responsibility to protect civilians? We could talk about this for hours. There are no easy answers.
Nope, it's a whole can of worms. But one thing's for sure. This whole thing in Lebanon is a stark reminder that peace is a fragile thing. And sometimes it only takes something as small as a pager to shatter it completely.